Hello there, I'm Richard and I'm interested in modern careers and what we have to do to be successful in organisations as we navigate ourselves through sometimes tricky waters. And I coach and I teach and I also write career-minded business books, and it's great fun and I love what I do. So when we think about the question how to keep our jobs, the first place to start is with the added value concept. And the question we have here is, how good are you really? We're all at work, we work really hard, we do our best every day potentially, however we are being paid. Now I know that I've had good days and bad days, and I'm sure that you do too. So the key thing is to recognise that we can score ourselves for the three key elements that we have at work that make up what I call the added value concept. And the three areas are firstly productivity. Are we actually doing the work that we're paid for? Secondly, people skills. Are we a grumpy person? Are we a smiley person? Do we get on with people? Do we ask good questions? Those kind of things. And thirdly, and the one that most people seem to forget, which is PR. Now I know PR can get a bit of a bad press. People think it's all celebrity based. They think you've got to be smarmy. That's not the case organisationally. What I mean here is really who knows you exist. We're going to go into that in more detail a bit later, but for now, let's just accept that we have these three basic concepts: productivity, people skills, and PR. Now I've coached quite a lot of people and noticed that once we start to score ourselves, then improvements get made. Here's how you do it. Productivity. How good are you on a scale of 1 to 20? 1 being pretty poor and 20 being an exceptionally high performer. Have a think for a second. Where would you score yourself for, say, the last 2 weeks of work? Okay, so you've got a number now. The second thing to do is think about your people skills. And for this, score yourself on a scale out of 15. So 1 is low and 15 is high. And if you're scoring 13, 14, 15, that means that you're a friendly person, you get on with lots of people, maybe you're really good at liaising with senior managers. And I know myself, when I started off, I was much more of a 5 or 6 because I didn't know very much about how to interact with people. So anyway, give yourself a score for that. Having done those two, we now need to think about our public relations. And what I mean by that is, who knows you exist in the organisation and what kind of good things do they say about you? Now I know for myself, I used to suffer from terrible public relations because I would always ask silly questions at the wrong time in perhaps a slightly aggressive manner. And I didn't really realise what I was doing, but of course it all contributed to an image of Richard of being perhaps not as good as he could have been. Think about what you do in your organisation. Think about who knows that you're there, and think about the kind of messages you give people. Score yourself out of 10, 1 being low and 10 being really high. So if you network effectively, if you liaise with lots of senior managers and you promote good news stories, give yourself a 10. If you struggle or do nothing, as certainly where I started, give yourself a 1. So now score yourself for your PR activity. So you now have 3 scores. 1 for productivity, 1 for people skills, and 1 for PR. What I'd like you to do is multiply them together. So for example, if you scored 10, 10 and 2, 10 tens are 100, times 2 is 200. And the maximum score you can get is 3,000. And once you multiply things together, you realise the net effect of how these things work in combination. So for example, being great at 2 things and lousy at the third actually means that your overall score is dragged down. Being average at everything actually means that you can be outperformed by someone who is average at 2 things and much better at something else. And the benefit of multiplying them is that it exaggerates our scores and really gives us a sense of what we call our organisational impact score, which is the kind of sum total of how the organisation perceives you, the value you add back to the organisation, and the way you interact with people. Knowing your score is important. If you want to keep your job, You need to have a sense of awareness in terms of what you actually do on a day-to-day basis, and maybe how good you can compare yourself to a whole league table. So if you think about the people in your team, think about the people on your floor, or maybe think about colleagues that do a similar job, where would you sit? Now you've got your score. Are you at the top of the league table, in a safe zone, or if this is the cut line here, are you somewhere underneath and liable to lose your job? If you want to keep your job, the essential thing is score yourself on a regular basis and ask yourself the question, am I adding value or am I wasting their money?